Hello everyone. I think it's nice to see you all on the webinar. I hope you're all keeping well in these strange times. It's been a while since we've connected, but I think it's a good opportunity because Sandeep has some inputs from his work that we hope to show you and also take your inputs from. So what I will do before I hand over to Sandeep is give you a little bit on the context and how this work came about and what maybe the thoughts on how we see this work getting utilized going forward. So Sandeep, as you know, I don't think he needs an introduction in this group. He's worked with Shakti for donkey's years, I think, ever since we started, and so some of his work in terms of the bus report, bus depot design reports, all of them are in use, and you may be familiar with them. But recently, in the last, I think 3 years ago, we started a project with him on looking at long-range planning for utilities, the bus utilities. And the issue there essentially was that um, these companies are resource hungry. Essentially, they are starved for resource, which is what's keeping them from growing in size, which is what's keeping them from expanding service. And if you have to have a reasonable conversation around how that can change, what that scenario would be, we need to empower them with some of that information itself, saying if you had X amount more, you would be able to do so much more. Or if you had less, what the impact of that would be as well. So that's where the motivation for our previous work started. But then when we went towards the end, we saw that this was quite powerful because the 2-3 agencies we worked with, all of them started using that information that they got to negotiate with their states. So J&K and Maharashtra, I think, were one of the success cases. I think AP, it somehow fell through the cracks, I think, because the MD there changed. But these two were quite successful, and we saw that model can definitely be replicated. And needs to probably get replicated in mass and made easier for more actors to replicate as well, so that this conversation can happen elsewhere. And that was the motivation for which we started with the tool. So what we did, and this is what Sandeep will give you more clarity on, is that we created a tool that can be used by the likes of yourselves, experts in the area of public transport, to either one, do this activity, undertake this activity for their own cities, for your own areas of work, and may also help STUs undertake this activity if they so desire. But also, it can be a powerful tool when it comes to advocacy by understanding where the gaps lie, how much more resources may be required, what are our demands looking like, and why do they look the way they look, right? So that's some of the areas in which we imagine this tool to be utilized. Of course, again, I think Sandeep will take you through it, but I think what we would like to see also is for you to maybe start utilizing it in your work if you can. You may be working with some of the STUs right now. See if it can be utilized. Do a dry run in that sense. Put in some of the inputs. Some of the data is already in there, so play around with the tool, and also provide us inputs and feedback on what you think may be improved, if there are any aspects that can be changed. So having said that, I think that may be a good point to hand it over to Sandeep. And again, welcome you all to this webinar, and it's good to have you here. We look forward to your inputs. So do ask questions. Don't feel shy. I think the more we learn from you, the better this work will get. So please do go ahead and question, ask doubts, and then let's see how this goes. All right, over to you, Sandeep. All the best with the webinar.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you for this nice introduction. I think we have a good start. And welcome, everyone. Again, as Vivek said, I also hope that everybody is keeping safe. And of course, everybody is keeping busy also. I'm sure everybody is working from home. So with that, I'll just share my screen. I'll start with it. But with some experience, I'll say that just in case the electricity fails here, it may take me 5 minutes to come back on, because my modem takes that much amount of time to basically restart on the electricity backup. So bear with me in that eventuality. But I'm sure nothing of that sort is going to happen. So I'll just start. Let's see. I hope everybody can see the screen. Vivek, is it visible to everyone? I don't know.
You're visible. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So Vivek has already given a very detailed introduction on what this tool is about and why we went about this study to make this tool. This has specifically been designed for STUs, primarily for the use of STU officers, but it can also be used by advocacy groups, CSOs, and a lot of other partners, a lot of other consultants who may be assisting the STUs. So I will, what I'm going to do in this presentation is I will go through, because I think most of the audience here is quite technical. The intention here is to take you through what this tool is about and how it works, what are the outputs that are generated, and then most likely there'll be more questions, and probably that will invite you to maybe use it in your works. I don't think I need to say much about this. I mean, this is already spoken about it. Shakti is funding the development of this tool. We started this study in May 2019. It was a year-long study, but the groundwork for this was started in 2017, as Vivek just pointed out, with the long-range plans that were developed for a total of 4 STUs before this. And as a part of this study, we developed long-range plans for an additional 2 STUs, one urban and one non-urban STU. And for those who don't know me, my name is Sandeep Gandhi, and I'm from SGA. And we primarily work on sustainable mobility projects. A lot of research work that we do in this field. Vivek has spoken about it. I won't take more time on that. But for this particular project, the technical advisors for us are Trip IIT Delhi. And so they have also been involved in this study. This is some of the work that we have been doing. I'll just skip this, no need for this. And contents also we have just spoken about. So now, starting with the background. So what was the need for this? Vivek has already given some starting points. But I mean, for us, when we had started working in 2017 for these STUs, the understanding was that most of the STUs were struggling to even survive. And the reason for that was that these STUs were primarily looked at loss-making organizations. So, for example, one of the very first STUs that we started working with was Himachal Pradesh State Road Transport Corporation. I think it had a very useful mode share, and not only that, this particular STU was really struggling to seek funds from the state government, and so the need was put forth by them, and they basically. When we had a discussion with them, they suggested that it would have been much better for them to seek these funds if they had some kind of a long-range plan, or even if they could tell the state government where they would be 5 years from now if they had this kind of a money in hand. So we started by doing this exercise for HP, and then it was followed up with J&K Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh. So we basically did develop these plans, but the limitation for these plans were that there were 2 limitations. One was the scalability and the usability. I mean, it took us about 2-3 years or 2 years probably to develop these plans for 4 STUs. To scale it up to 56 STUs in India, I mean, for only limited number of consultants working on it, would be a tough job. The other thing is that how do you make it more usable? Because these are static documents. If you create a plan once, it cannot adapt to changes. So contextual changes or situational changes or technological changes that may happen 3, 4 years, 5 years down the line. We created a long range plan, which was for a period of 33 years. But I mean, you cannot have a static document for that longer period. So there was a definitive need for this document to be more flexible, more usable. And so we realized that it would be much better that if we had a tool which could start generate the outputs, which can then be utilized to develop these long range plans and to guide the STUs on what they can do, what kind of resources are required in the future. So then what is this tool about? So this is simply an Excel based tool. So all the background on the back end calculations are all happening in Excel, but the front end is a VBA interface. So it is a Visual Basic interface. So you see forms in the front, which look more like a software forms, but the calculation. Can I request everybody to mute their mics, or maybe Vivek, you can mute everyone's mic. Satya, can you mute your mic, please?
You should be good to go, Sandeep.
A lot of inputs from the STU, but what it generates as outputs are long-term land requirement. I mean, I'm giving you some examples. There are a lot of outputs that are generated, but broadly it is telling you what will be your annual land requirement, what will be your annual budgetary requirement, or fleet purchase requirement, or staffing requirement, or infrastructure developmental requirement. So all of these annual requirement for a 33-year time period. And so to generate these kind of outputs, the fleet really uses two kind of estimators. As I said, because the tool is primarily designed for STU officials, the primary estimator is a very detailed estimator, and it requires detailed STU data specific inputs. So I mean, the detailed inputs on STU operations, service characteristics, fleet characteristics, budgetary characteristics, what you call financial characteristics. So all of those details for STUs are required in the primary estimator, and so you get similar detailed outputs when you use the primary estimator. Now we also have a secondary estimator, which we call a thumb rule estimator. This has been designed for use for a very quick, to generate very quick outputs in case you don't have detailed data. And so advocacy groups can also start using it. And this primarily works for the urban context. So it uses thumb rules and tells you for a 33-year period, what is the fleet size that will be required for a city, let's say. So maybe it's starting today from 2020 to 2053. What is the fleet size that will be required, that the city should have to cater to a particular population for each year up to 2053. So as I mentioned, the primary estimator here requires detailed data, and this detailed data can be divided into three parts. To begin with, you need regional data. And by regional data, I mean you require population details, you require the details of the trips that are undertaken. And those could be trips disaggregated by distance, by characteristics. So work trips, non-work trips, tourist trips, things like that. Intercity trips and intra-city trips. So all those kind of trip details, growth rate for population. There could be growth rate for tourist trips, which is sometimes different from the population. I mean, most of the time different from the population growth rates. And this is available in tourist reports that many of the regions develop, or there could be other secondary sources. So that's the regional data. The second type of data that is required is the current STU data. And of course, so this is all the operational and the financial and service details, current service operation and operational details of the STU. And the third type of data that is required is the vision data. And this should be of interest to a lot of you here, because what this is talking about, this relates more to policy and planning. So, I mean, we have the current details for the STU. We have, for example, if I take any operational characteristics for an STU, let's say, what is the average occupancy for the buses that the STU is operating? That's the current occupancy. Now, the vision is what is it that they expect to achieve in a particular time frame. So it could be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, up to 33 years, or maybe even more. So whatever is the vision that they want to that they want to achieve. This vision data, so it is about this characteristics changing over a period of time. It is also about more importantly, it is about the mode share changing over a period of time. So I mean, I'll give you an example. 20 years ago, Delhi DTC had a mode share of close to 42%. Currently, it's at 24%. Now, what do we see the mode share for DTC in the next 10 years? Do we expect it to achieve 40% again, or 30%, 34%, whatever? And this could be derived from the policy. So if we were to derive it from policy for Delhi, it would be close to 40%, or it could be derived from planning documents like CMP. For example, in Bangalore, the current mode share is 19.77%, and the CMP suggests that in 10 years, the mode share for BMTC should be anywhere between 22 and 43%. Oh, sorry, 28 and 43%. So I mean, so you can basically, so you require these kind of inputs to plot that path from current to the future in this 33-year time period. And so you require this vision data. And then again, when working in the tool, the tool, because we have to make it user friendly, it allows you to adjust the amount of details that you want to input. So you can adjust the granularity of the data, adjust basis the granularity of the data that is available with you. And also it provides you flexibility of adjusting in terms of scenarios that you want to build for the future. When I'm talking about granularity of the data, basically this detailing or the adjustment of detailing of data that is available, or the outputs that you require, can be in two levels. So in the first level, let's say, I'll give you an example. Supposing you are looking at an STU which is operating two types of buses, air-conditioned and non-air-conditioned buses. So we are saying that it's running two kind of services. So let's say AC service and non-AC service. And so at one level, this is the detailing that we can add. So granularity means that you can define a number of different services. So you can have two services, let's say AC and non-AC. Within that also there may be other differences. So I mean, within AC you may have express bus service and all stop service, and within non-AC you may also have an express bus service and an all stop service. So now it becomes 4 services. So you can define as many as 24 services to be evaluated together. And they may be, the need for defining them separate is because they may have different characteristics. So they may have different earning characteristics, different cost characteristics. The vehicle cost may be different. The age limit for buses may be different. The staff to bus ratio may be different. Operational characteristics may be different, say vehicle utilization and fleet utilizations. So, I mean, if these characteristics are different, and if tomorrow the composition of these services changes, then the overall resource requirement for the STU also changes. So that's why the tool allows you to define multiple services with different characteristics. In the second layer, what it allows you to do is to adjust for temporal changes. So for each one of these characteristics, let's say currently, I'll again take the same example. You had AC and non-AC bus service. Let's talk about the AC bus service. If the current earning per kilometer or the current EPK for the AC bus service was 50 rupees, let's say, you may say that there are chances that it is going to go down to 40 rupees in the future. So there is this change, temporal change that can happen for each characteristic of that bus service also. So, I mean, your earning per kilometer can change, your fleet utilization can change, your vehicle utilization can change. For example, Bangalore had one of the scenarios that they are looking for developing reserved bus lanes. I think they have already started with some reserved bus lanes for BMTC buses. So what if they had reserved bus lanes for on most of the routes? Then obviously their vehicle utilization will go up. And so that transition can also be plotted in the second layer. So you can, in your vision, define what will be your, what is the current you have already defined, then what is your future operational and service characteristics you define. You then also input the number of years it will change for each one of those characteristics to change for each one of those services, and you define the trajectory of that change. So it can be exponential, linear, logarithmic, whatever. That can happen. And also what can happen is that the composition itself of those services can change. Again, I'll give you an example. Bangalore is currently running 3 diesel bus services. That is non-AC, it is a Volvo AC service, and then there's a Volvo airport service. So it has 3 services. But what it is now probably starting to do is, or what it plans to do is that from this year, start inducting electric bus services, and in next 10 years, it plans that 100% of the fleet will be electric and all the diesel buses will be phased out in these 10 years. So now the composition, so it's basically you can define these 4 services. Electric is 0% today, and the other 3 combined to become 100%. And over the next 10 years, it's going to be reverse. Electric is going to be 100 and the other 3 are going to become 0%. So now the tool allows you to adjust that trajectory, that transition also. So the composition of the services itself can change, and within each service, your operational and your service characteristics, all that change can also be plotted over a period of time. Of course, I mean, it may look like a lot to absorb. I can understand. So basically we have a very detailed user manual. This I think Vivek would have already shared, or we will share. It's also there on our website. We'll share it after. If we haven't, we'll share it after the presentation along with the tool. So this user manual provides all the conceptual details and also all the input related details. So for each input and for each form, what is required, and it guides you through. It is a very detailed manual. I would suggest if you start playing around with the tool, do keep the user manual handy. So now I'll just get into the tool itself, how the look and feel of the tool, and how the data is captured by the tool. Once you basically click on the file, it will prompt you for a password, and that password also I'll share separately, and it is also mentioned in the user manual. When you enter the password, this form opens, and I don't know if you can look at. Okay, I'll just minimize this. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So when this form opens, you will see. Yeah, you will see that there are 2 sets of buttons. On the left hand side, there are these 4 buttons which are for the primary estimator, and on the right hand side there is this button which is for the secondary estimator. And I will just take you through the secondary estimator. So if you press this button on the city bus fleet calculator, this kind of a form opens. What this form really does, it has very simple inputs. So it is basically just asking you what is the starting year of your estimation. So it could be, I've entered 2040, you can enter, let's say 2020, today is the starting year. Then you are basically inputting what is the growth rate of your population, the annual growth rate. You may already have the population data for that city. Let's say it's Delhi. You may have the population data for 2019. So you enter the data year as 2019 and enter the population here. Or it could be like census data or something, and so then it will be 2011, and then you enter the census population. Or you may just enter whatever your estimated population is for 2040 in this box. And then here it gives you 2 choices. I will talk about these choices later, but let's see if this is selected, estimate buses per 1000 population, and you press the calculate button. it calculates this constant, which is basically a ratio of buses per 1,000 population. So it's saying 0.38, and this figure, this constant, is calculated through this bell curve. And this bell curve has been generated using data from about 35 Indian cities for different sizes, ranging from 10,000, 20,000, 40,000 population, all the way to Delhi, which is basically more than 2 crores. So basically, you get this constant. Once this constant is calculated, using this constant and the population, which is also estimated by the tool, it estimates the number of buses required in each of the years. So because I entered 2040, all the way from 2040 till 2073, the number of buses that will be required in each year using this bell curve. Of course, it is also suggesting what kind of a bus it should be. It should be an urban bus. What kind of bus operation type? These are just suggestive. And so, because once you have very less population, urban buses really are not making sense. Probably entire public operation will not make sense. And so it is then suggesting midi and mini buses. And that's also, that data also we generated looking at some secondary numbers. Coming back to the primary estimator, if you go into the primary estimator, and here there are two main buttons. You can press new, or you can press continue. New will start with a blank form, but if you have already inputted data for a particular STU, you can press continue, and then it will start with the data that you have already been provided in the tool. And so this is the first form that appears, and this form is really to capture the regional data. Vivek, I think there are 4 more people waiting to join. If you can let them in. Yeah. So, so in this form, because as I mentioned, you need to input details about population, urban, rural, total population, and details about trips. So this is a huge amount of data, which is generally not available with STUs. You can of course collect this data. It is available from other secondary sources. If a planner wants to do it, they will easily find this data, and you can fill these boxes. But to make things easier, what we have done is we have already created a database. That database has been created for about 56 Indian STUs, and this whatever STU, if one of your STU, whatever you are evaluating, is one of these, you can select it from using this drop down menu. So for example, here Orissa State Road Transport Corporation has been selected. So the data for OSRTC will appear. I mean, it will autofill all of these boxes. You can of course edit all of this data. You can change whatever you want to change. And here in this box, you define you basically tell the tool how many services you want to define in it. So you are, for example, here I've entered the number 4. So in all the subsequent forms, I will be given, the tool will show me 4 rows to input data for each one of these services separately. In case I do not have service specific details, I can press this button, which is input aggregated data. And then it will show me, then I just have to basically input the aggregated details for the STU, but the outputs will also then be aggregated. They will not be disaggregated by services. So the next form, it shows, is for capturing fleet related details. I define, because I had input 4 as the number of services. So it shows me 4 rows. I can give a name to each one of these services. I give the average seating capacity for the vehicles or the buses used for each one of these services. And more importantly here, I define the age of these services. So basically, if there are 93 buses for which are operating under AC Deluxe service, what is the age distribution of those services? How many buses are 1 year or less older, between 1 to 2 years old, between 2 to 3 years old, and all the way up to more than 15 years old? So I input those numbers, and this is important because I need to, when you are estimating the resource requirement, not just in terms of budget, but in terms of buses that need to be purchased every year, you need to know how many buses are being scrapped, by the STU buses which have reached their age. And so that replacement also needs to be accounted for. And that's why we also define the age limit for these buses here. So we tell the tool, okay, for AC Deluxe, the age limit is 10 years and so on. Then here we can input the cost of the bus, the capital cost of the bus, also the scrap value of the bus. So after it reaches its age, if I scrap the bus, what is the amount of money that I will get back into the system? And lastly, you can input depending on the kind of contract you have, whether if you have complete public operations, then of course the depot also needs to be developed by the STU. So you select, yes, you need to do the depot development. The STU needs to do the depot development. But in case it's a GCC contract or something of that sort, the STU may not be required to invest in the depot development. The private operator may be required to do so. And in that case, you select no for those particular services. And the idea is then it will not account for the cost of depot development in that scenario. So in your resource requirement, that cost will not be included. Going forward, you input a lot of operational details. You input the earning per kilometer, cost per kilometer, average daily kilometers that is scheduled to be run for each one of those services. I think most of these terms, if many of you have already been working in bus operations, you'll be aware of. But if not, I mean, I can explain them later after the presentation. Average route length. Of course, it is also allowing you to input what is the percentage share of pass holders. Why we are adding this? Because what is happening is that the details available in terms of passenger trips with the STU is primarily from the ticket sales. But there are more passengers in the bus if there are pass holders. And so that percentage is required. If you input this detail, the tool accounts for those additional passengers. And so the occupancy is also calculated based on these additional passengers. So this is the actual kilometers achieved. So these are scheduled kilometers. And what is the average achieved kilometers? Hours of operation, this is the load factor. So that's the occupancy. Number of routes, staff to bus ratio, dead kilometers. So those are the operational inputs that you provide. Then you also provide details of infrastructure, how many depots. This is all for the current year or the evaluation year. So it may be current year, that's 2020, or you may put in the evaluation year, let's say a earlier year, 2020, 2015, 2011, whatever that may be, because you want to look at, I mean, if you want to do some kind of a validation, then your evaluation year may be earlier. So here you define the existing sites, in that evaluation year or the current year, what are the depot sites that are there already, terminal sites and the bus depot sites, total area that is available for bus terminals and depots, and the area that has been developed already, and the total land that is available. Following this, you see this small form which allows the users to select the estimation method. And I'll take a few minutes here to basically explain what is the difference in these two estimation methods. Let's again take that example. So if we have, let's say 50% AC bus service, if we have a fleet of 1,000 buses, 500 are AC buses and 500 are non-AC buses, we may say that the composition by the fleet is 50% AC and 50% non-AC. But if we were to look at the composition by the passenger trips catered by each one of these service, that is AC and non-AC service, it may be very different, because AC service is more expensive. You may have a lesser passenger share, so you may have just 25% passengers by AC bus service and 75% passengers by non-AC bus service. So if I were to look at the composition by passenger trips, then it would be 25% and 75%. So what is the composition in the evaluation being used at? Is it by bus fleet or is it by passenger trip? That's what you select here. And what you also select here is something called whether you want to generate an unutilized fleet or not. And I'll give you an example. This is from Bangalore. So this is just showing you a trend. This is what the tool had plotted, because as I said that in 10 years, Bangalore is looking at 100% fleet of electric bus services. So this yellow line is electric bus services. So now by 2029, and the evaluation was done in 2019. So in 10 years, 100% of these of the fleet will be, and this is the total fleet, the dotted line will become electric, and all these three other services are becoming zero over this period of time. Now, if I had to follow this trend exactly as per plan and achieve this target by 2029, it would mean that every year I purchase a set of electric buses and I let go of a set of diesel buses. Now I will be forced to take those buses off from my services, even if they haven't reached their retirement age, if I have to basically stick to this plan. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm generating unutilized fleet. The other alternative is that I tell the tool that, okay, no, I'm flexible. Even if I don't achieve my target as 2029, but I want to retain, I want to utilize my fleet till its retirement age, 100% of the fleet till its retirement age, then I will not get this kind of a smooth curve as per plan. My curve will be more crooked because I will only be forced to buy the buses. Buy buses when my existing fleet has reached its age for scrapping. And so now you'll see that I'm not achieving 100% by 2029, but actually by 2033. So it's an extension of 4 years. So that's what that allows me to do. And it then also in the outputs, it also generates that if I am generating unutilized fleet, if I'm sticking to the plan, then these are the number of buses for different services that will be taken out of service before they reach their age. So this is the unutilized fleet. Following this, you will see now, of course, the third set of inputs need to be captured, which is the vision data. So the tool starts to tell you what is your existing data, and then it starts to ask you what is your vision. So I'll give you an example. Here is the composition. By the number of buses that I've input, the tool is just simply calculating the percentage composition basis. So not just by, it could be either by the number of buses or it could be by the number of passenger trips, depending on what estimation method I've selected. So it shows me the existing composition, and then it asks me for desired composition. And this desired composition has to be same. If I'm selecting passenger trips, then I have to input the composition by passenger trips here. And so I input the desired composition, and I also input the number of years I will take to achieve this composition, this change in composition. So if from 27% non-AC buses have to be increased to 59%, I'm saying I will do it in 1 year, or it could be 10 years, it could be 30 years, it could be 100 years, whatever that number is. And I also select the trajectory of the change. So whether that change will be exponential, linear, or logarithmic. This was a composition, but you can do the same exercise for each one of the operational and service characteristics. So for example, for this AC's deluxe service, you can define, the current fleet utilization, you can define your projected fleet utilization, your years to achieve that target, and select the trajectory. And you can do it for all of these. So that's for fleet utilization, that's for vehicle utilization, that's for occupancy. And then in the following form, you get more EPK, cost per kilometer, earning per kilometer, staff to bus ratio, current operational routes, route length, also cost. And this is very important, especially for electric buses, because as was in the case of Bangalore, and I'll show you some examples, some outputs for Bangalore after this, if you have to convert it to 100% electric, what is the cost of those electric buses? And it is expected that the cost of the electric bus is going to change over a period of time. It is going to reduce. The inputs that were decided with BMTC was at 1.8 crore per bus in the current year. And by 2030, this cost is going to come down to 1 crore per bus. And so it allows you to input that. There's a current cost that we input it in the second form, and then you can input the expected cost in whatever is the time frame of that change, and of course the trajectory. This is also another important factor, the trip length. So the average passenger trip length has been estimated by the data that has been provided. The tool estimates that, and then it asks you that what do you expect it to change. So if it is a urban scenario, you may say that the passenger trip length is going to change as the city is expanding. You may have some estimates about that, and so you can input those details, the number of years that the change will take place, trajectory of change again. And lastly, you can input the mode share. So it will show you the current mode share, and this OSRTC was very, very less. So current mode share and the desired mode share. And also you can do it for STU buses. You may say that for other buses, if you think that your mode share is going to increase, STU's mode share is going to increase and other buses is going to reduce, you can basically input those data. So IPT mode share, all those things you can input. Also, in all forms, you get this button which is called default values, and default values can take you to in any of the forms. It will take you to it will show this kind of a form which has all the default values which can be edited by the user. So if you are really interested in a lot of details and a lot of assumptions that are going in, you can look into the manual for these default values. They are all explained in the manual, and the tool is sensitive to all these changes that you make to these default values. So those can be changed. I'll give you a small example here. There's an assumption saying that 5% of buses in a bus terminal, the STU buses are 95% and 5% of buses are basically from other STUs. So if I'm doing it for BMTC, or let's say in case of an intercity services, let's say if it was MSRTC, so I may say that 95% of the buses in that bus terminal are from MSRTC, but 5% are from GSRTC coming from Gujarat or whatever it is. So that's the number that you can change. These assumptions you can change. You can change some costs, the development cost for depots, the developing cost for bus terminals, all of those things, those values can be changed. That was the last form that I had shown. After that form, it generates an output. Basically all your inputs go to the back end, and it uses a lot of processes, and I have included a flow chart in the manual which explains all the processes, so that if somebody is interested in understanding how are these estimates being generated, what are the calculations. So there are some formulas, and also the processes are explained, so you can take a look at that. And so the output is really a separate Excel file which is saved, and it has some 35 or 36 outputs. It really looks like this. So it has the table on top, and it has some graphs at the bottom. Now I'll briefly take you through an application of this tool which we did, because for development of this tool we had partnered with two STUs, which was BMTC and OSRTC. So we had used their data, we interacted with their officers while we understood their requirements, and we basically developed the outputs and long range plans using this tool for both of these STUs. So this is the BMTC long range. These are excerpts from the BMTC long range plan that I'll just present. So this is just the regional data which the tool generates on its own. You most likely will not need to input any details, but you may want to edit some things. Then these are the STU data. Some of the STU data that was provided by us by BMTC, and you'll see here this is the overall number, and this, just take it here. So, sorry. So yeah, so this is an overall number, and for each one of these 4 services, the disaggregation of that number. So the fleet strength, so that's the regular service 5632, low floor AC buses 742, and airport shuttle services 108, and the electric service is 0 today. So this is all current year data. And then again, fleet utilization, electric buses, this is the expected fleet utilization, and this was basically from an understanding from the STU, and also because the kind of operations that these buses are going to do. So they were replicating the operations by service 1. So they basically use this number. Vehicle utilization was expected to be lower because of range constraints of electric bus, current range constraints. Then the number of trips catered per day, 0 for electric buses, and these are number for other services. Load factor, staff to bus ratio. Sorry. And this is what the future numbers of vision inputs are. So I mean, in future, that's for, and their time frame was 10 years. So in 10 years, these three services become 0, and electric becomes 100%. Fleet utilization changes, vehicle utilization is changing. For example, these three services, it is changing, but for electric buses, it's same. And this number was actually, we made we generated 5 scenarios, and in one of the scenarios we changed this number, saying that there will be reserved bus lanes, and then there'll be technological improvements in terms of battery. So this range is going to improve. I'll explain those scenarios later. Number of operational routes that will be there in the future, these become 0, and this becomes the total number of routes. Load factor, and till the last bus is running, this is what the load factor will be. And the staff to bus ratio. And so briefly, these are the outputs, and I'm presenting 4 out of those 5 outputs. So in scenario 1, we are converting all diesel buses to all electric, so 100% electric, but the mode share remains the same, 19.77%. So in this scenario, your fleet strength from current 6,500 buses will need to increase to about 11,400 buses. Routes are same. The number of trips that are catered per day will increase by about 10 lakhs. Staff is going to increase by, is almost doubling over this time period, staff requirement. And you'll require about another 115 hectares of land for development of the depots and bus terminals for all these additional buses that are being brought in. And then this is the total. So these are annual budgetary requirements. So this is the budgetary requirement in that particular year. So 2030, this is just the requirement for 2030. But here the figure at the bottom, which is close to 32,000 crores, this is the total state support that is required in this scenario for over this next 10 years. And that state support means any operational losses that need to be covered up, money to be provided for purchase of new buses, including replacing existing buses and expanding the fleet, money required for development of infrastructure, bus depots and terminals. So all of that totals to about 32,000 crores in the next 10 years. In scenario 2, the mode share is increasing. It's 100% electric, but we are saying this is a CMP mode share, 28%. And so your fleet requirement goes up to 16,000. And the number of trips that will be catering to increases by 30 lakhs to about 73 lakhs. And here at the total budget that the state support, this is not the budget, but the support that will, so the total budget is actually the amount of money that will go in is about 73,000 crores. But then there are revenues and things like that. So the viability gap is about 43,000 crores. So that this is the amount of money that will need to be pumped in by the state to achieve this scenario over the next 10 years. There was the third scenario we created was same as scenario 2, except instead of going 100% electric, we said we go 100% Euro 6 diesel. In that case, what happens is obviously the capital requirement comes, the state support requirement comes down to about 20,000 crores. And in the last scenario, we increase the mode share to 33%, but we also increase the vehicle utilization. And in this scenario, it was expected that the battery technology will improve for electric buses. So your range is going to improve. So that means your utilization will go up. Also, BMTC will have reserved bus lanes on along most of the routes. And so the utilization will go up. And so in this scenario, you achieve much more number of trips. So another 12 lakhs extra from scenario 3 per day. But the number of buses that are required almost remains the same. And the overall budget between these two scenarios, scenario 2 and scenario 4, also remains the same. Just because the vehicle utilization goes up. It's just to basically demonstrate that this tool allows you to look at the impact of these changes in these operational and service characteristics, not just overall, but also service-wise. So I mean, if you have 4 services, if just the service characteristics of one service is changing, how is it impacting your overall resource requirements over this next 33 years? And I'll just present some graphs for this second scenario, which was the main scenario presented to BMTC in their long range plan. And these are all the graphs that I've taken from the output file. Basically just presenting the mode share, how the mode share looks over the years, over the next 33 years. How will the daily passenger trips increase for STU buses and for other buses over this next 33 years. Fleet composition, and because we selected linear change, so these are all straight lines, and in 10 years basically you're going all electric. Occupancy, how it is going to change, and in all of these graphs the black dotted line is the weighted average for all of the 4 services. Again, vehicle utilization, because you're going all electric, so vehicle utilization overall is going down because the vehicle utilization electric bus that was input was less than for other buses. Of course, that's what was input for BMTC. That may not be the case. So of course, for different STUs, they may have different data, and so the outputs will be different. So the fleet utilization, how that is changing over the years. Passenger trip length, so expected to go up. So that's what happened. Budgetary requirement for development of depots and terminals. So this is the annual budgetary requirement. So close to anywhere between 60 to 100 crores per year for depot, and another 20 to 30 crores per year for bus terminals that is required. Number of bus depots and terminals that need to be developed. Cumulative land requirement. So into the total land that is required to be developed for depots and terminals. So I mean, this is cumulative. And so you may have existing land, so you need to subtract that to know exactly how much extra you need to acquire or ask for from the state government. This is the fleet growth, and this is basically the purchase requirement, the bus purchase requirement, and this is very different from fleet growth, this graph. And the reason for that is because it is also accounting for replacement of buses when you are scrapping existing buses. So in the initial year, you see this black dotted line, which is the total bus purchase requirement going up and down because you are replacing some buses. So initially you are replacing your existing diesel buses also for the first 5-6 years, while you are increasing your share of electric buses up till 2029. And then because the electric bus age is 15 years, that has been input, you don't need to replace any of the electric buses. You are only adding the buses that is required to account for the population growth, because you have also achieved your mode share, whatever the target mode share was, from 19.77 to 28% in the first 10 years. So that's why this is very shallow. And then it starts to repeat again because these buses need to be replaced, plus some additional buses need to be bought to keep up with the mode share requirements. Annual operating cost and profit. And so of course there's no profit. This line is going in the negative. So there are losses, expected losses. And this is telling you the viability gap. So the brown line is the annual money that needs to be pumped in by the state to ensure that this targets or this plan is met or this plan is materialized. And as I mentioned, it covers all sorts of things. So any operational losses, infrastructure development cost, and fleet procurement cost. And briefly, I mean, this looks like a very strange diagram to be brought it into these set of slides, but this is included in the manual. And I wanted to talk very briefly about this was because we are inputting these vision numbers, which are talking about mode share, which are talking about fleet utilization. So all of these factors. So eventually, what are you looking at as your earning per kilometer will be in the next 20, 30 years, or what will be your occupancy, or what will be your mode share. Now, when you're inputting these values, and even while I was explaining, many of you may be thinking that where do these numbers come from? So of course, it's scenario building. You build your different scenarios for different numbers. You say you may have a scenario on business as usual. So all of these numbers remain the same into the future, or you may have a progressive scenario where all of these indicators improve. But the fact is that you may say that your earning per kilometer is going to improve over the next 10 years. It may double or it may improve by 10%, whatever that may be the case, but it will not happen on its own. You will need to do some planning. There will be some planning intervention required, some policy intervention required. Maybe other stakeholders will also need to come in. Maybe if reserved bus lanes have to be developed to achieve, let's say, a higher vehicle utilization. In that case, your road owning agencies will also need to be coming. So basically, to achieve all of this, you need a lot of planning and policy intervention. So what this diagram is just showing you is that what are the planning and policy interventions that you need to bring in to achieve these positive changes that you may think is going to happen in the future scenarios. It is just to make the users aware that if I'm looking at some positive outlook in the future, I do require to make some effort to achieve that, and those efforts need to be made in all of these planning and operational for all of these planning and operational indicators. This is my last slide, and what I really want to end this presentation with is that what is my personal wish list, and I'm sure Vivek will also, and he's already mentioned, he will agree with it. Going forward, my personal wish list is to basically see this tool being adopted and used by a lot of STUs. We have already seen that the STUs have a lot of utility for these long range plans that are generated by this tool. But now what we are looking forward to is that the STUs start using the tool on their own and start developing their own long range plan and have a more, they are more involved in this whole process than just an external, than having an outsider's view, some external person, a consultant or others or other partners coming in to develop a static document for them. They create this tool as a very dynamic tool which they can adapt and change with changing requirements in the future. And of course, for that, we need to talk about this more with more STUs. I mean, make them aware that something like this exists. So that needs to be undertaken. Then very important is benchmarking and envisioning. So I mean, we may want to envision a scenario, but are there any benchmarks for all of these operational and service characteristics that we would like to achieve? So if you are talking about, let's say, fleet utilization, a good benchmark, maybe it's an acceptable benchmark is there for about 95% is considered to be a good fleet utilization. But for vehicle utilization, I'm not too sure. Also for occupancy, I don't see a good benchmark which is there for urban and for intercity services. So for a lot of these operational characteristics, without having this benchmark, it becomes very difficult to envision what the STU, even for STUs, what do they want to desire in this next 20, 30 years. And the third is that, of course, once the STUs start using it or others start using it, and we have more plans developed for a lot of these STUs, then it would be interesting to see how the government and the decision makers make use of these documents. Then do they become more eager to then invest in the STUs because they see long-term plans, they see long-term benefits, they can see where the money is going, and so on and so forth. I think with this I can end my presentation, and there is a link. You can download the tool there. I will share it separately also, and I will share the presentation also. I think I can end here. And over to you, Vivek, or anybody else who has any other questions.
Thanks, Sandeep. I think it would be good to invite questions at this point. So if there are any questions, do unmute yourself and ask, or if someone's speaking, you may just put your name in the chat box and I can get back to you. Go ahead, Shubham. Shravan, did you have a question?
I think, yeah, wanted to know what is this? What is the significance of the trajectory of change in the tool? Okay. What is the significance of trajectory of change? Is this that because okay, let me take an example. Let's say let's say you're for an STU like BMTC, they are going to go 100% electric over the next 10 years. But the rate of that change may not be constant. So I mean, let's say to become 100% electric, they need to buy some 12,000 buses in the next 10 years. So it doesn't mean that they are buying 1200, they are able to buy 1200 buses every year. I mean, currently they may say that there isn't enough capacity in this in the country. There may not be enough manufacturers who can provide 1200 buses every year. So but they know that over the years, as the demand for electric buses increases, this capacity is going to increase and the availability of electric buses is going to increase. So in that case, they would be looking at a gradual increase in that rate of purchase of buses. So they may be starting with 100 buses today and then going up to probably purchasing 3000 in the 10th year or something. So that means they are looking at really at a what you call exponential trajectory of change. So this trajectory of change allows you to build that rate of change for all of these, for let's say for composition and all of these operational characteristics over a period of time. So it's not just the change, but also the rate of change that you can then basically select. Shilpa has a question. So does the future requirement take into account efficiency, improvement? I'll read out this question, okay. So does the future requirement take into account efficiency, improvement measures, such as optimization of existing routes and crew reduction, dead miles, etc.? Yes, all of that, but it's not, I mean, you have to give it a value. So you can say that, let me take something here, that your efficiency is improving. That means I'm trying to say that my vehicle utilization is improving, let's say. If my vehicle utilization is improving, by how much? So you input that value and it will account for those changes. So as I said, you may say that your vehicle utilization, for BMTC, I'll take an example. The vehicle utilization was 77% for electric buses. That's what is estimated. In the current year, it will be 77%. But it is said that it is going to go up by 10%. So it will become 87% in the next 10 years. So yes, you can do that. If possible, could you please share your assumptions for calculations of depots and terminals? Okay, so these assumptions are there in the manual. So the manual details all these numbers. So there is a how many depots and terminals, and also these are okay. These assumptions are based on the two documents that we have developed earlier for ASRTU. So there's a bus depot design guideline and there's a bus terminal design guideline. So there are a lot of these numbers are already mentioned there. So and also the tool in the default values has these numbers, and the manual explains how these numbers are being used in the calculations. So these assumptions are there. You can look at the manual and understand all of them. For anybody else, I think if anybody wants, they can unmute themselves and speak also.
While other questions come in, maybe I'll ask you a question as well. Very fundamental question. If I was a user of the tool and it didn't have certain data points, what should I do then?
It didn't have, you mean you don't have data available for certain data points?
For certain data points, yes.
Okay, so as I said, I mean, in the exercises that we did with all of with these two STUs, we realized that this what you call this happens primarily when you do not have data for you do not have service level data. So see, all the other data is available in the what you call CIRT report that is also published every year, and that data is currently being shared by STUs. So, but that is an aggregated data combined for all services. But the data that may not be available is the service level data. And so this tool allows you to basically choose between inputting an aggregated data or service level details. So service level data is available with STUs, but a lot of other users may not have access to it, and they may only have access to secondary data from CIRT report. In that case, they can use that button. It's on the in the very first the second form, the regional data form. There's a button where you define the number of services. You can select that button, and it is called aggregated data button. So it basically, after that, it will only ask you for aggregated numbers. So it will not ask you for compositions and things like that.
Fair enough. Thank you. I think Lakshmi has a question. Can the tool also facilitate depot level planning, as some interventions happen at the depot level?
Okay. No, this tool cannot facilitate depot level planning. It can if you have, so for example, if you have depots separate for different technologies, it can do it. If you really are very keen about doing depot level planning, and your number of depots are not more than 24, even then you can do it, because you can define all these services as 24 services, 24 different services. But because number of depots are much higher, this is taking aggregated data for each services from all the depots that are being used. But there is a different tool that we had worked on, again a Shakti product, that is called TRIMS for STU. That works on, that looks at indicators at depot level. Of course, that is it in testing phase, and maybe Vivek, sometime you can share it with this audience. If they are keen on testing something like that, and really look at depot level interventions. But yes, this one currently doesn't look at depot level details. No, depot level data is not there. How are we predefining pattern? So this is from Aswathi KP. How are we predefining pattern of trajectory change based on historical data, future planning interventions? What? Okay. Or okay. So as I gave you an example that it can be based on your historic trends. That's one for sure. But in some cases, like if you are basically, as I gave an example for electric buses, this is basically based on other limitations, manufacturing limitations, availability limitations, also technology maturing limitations. So I mean, you know that there will be a particular trajectory also there could be, let's say, I mean, I'm talking, this is for exponential, but for the logarithmic curve, again, there may be some other, you may say that because a particular STU needs to cover up a lot of ground, they're going to invest a lot of money in making certain change. And so they achieve higher rate of change in the initial years, and gradually it fades out, and it basically, when it is about to achieve its target, the pace slows down. So basically, it is got to do with planning interventions and also other limitations that will be there. And of course, it can be based on historical data, historical trends. So any other questions? I don't know. But is it? But I mean, I can ask the audience this question, and probably on your behalf also, Vivek. We can ask that we can take a poll that how many of the people present here really do think that there is a utility for something like this, and they are more likely to use it sometime in the near future. I don't know if people will answer.
Do feel free to unmute yourself and respond to Sandeep's question.
Very small group. No responses. Vivek, you can respond. I think only two of us are here.
I'm going to rely on my grantees to do this work. Come on. And they're in the chat. No, but so I think just to give some context to our work, I think if we were to again start talking about resource requirements, and that's become the next big thing that we are doing with STUs. We will find it very difficult without some kind of a planning framework within which the resource requirements are being demanded. Even if it's a conversation at the national bus scheme that we're having, or at a state level where we're talking about viability gap funding, the state's first question is kitna chahiye, kyon chahiye, right? And that's never going to get answered if we don't have a plan. So if we want sustainability of our STUs, we will have to take at least, I mean, even if it is not as granular as going down to the service level, because that really is something that an STU is going to be very interested in, and it's getting into the granularity. But even at a larger fleet level, if we were to start looking at what the requirements from the STU are, that would really help. Voice our demands, also voice, in a sense, give them voice, give the STUs voice to voice what they need. If I were to look at some of the kind of work that we've been able to do, for example, WRI with the tax concession they got at with the old argument that taxes should probably not be applied on STUs in the first place, that was carried through the MD and then to the State Department. So empowering the MDs, empowering the STUs to have this conversation is going to be very important. As a first driver. And of course, we can also use those same arguments in our advocacy work. So yeah, I think that's how at least we see the utility of this work. So yeah, and I do hope that others can use this tool as well. But then I think let's open it up maybe for some comments from the partners as well.
Shiva here.
Hey Shiva, go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the most difficult aspect is to, especially working with STUs, to make them to use such a tool as a culture, which is very, very difficult because they're not accustomed to such activities. So it was nice that BMTC has engaged in such activities. I wanted to understand from Sandeep, like how was the response from BMTC, and what level of officers really worked with you to support you in this exercise, whatever you tried?
So, I mean, my experience, and I'll tell you, I've worked with 6 STUs. And of these 6 STUs, the progressive ones, of course, were all of the Indian STUs. So, I mean, we have BMTC, APSRTC, MSRTC. They were really, really progressive in terms of they have officers, even HP for that matter. I mean, they have officers who understood this very well. They have statistical general managers, statistics, and all sorts of GM operations, for example. These guys do understand these numbers very well. They do understand the utility of a plan. But what is happening is that because there are so many variables in this, they tend to make they tend to avoid doing a very long term thing. So basically, they do it for a year. For every budgetary requirement, they do put together some kind of a plan, but they do not do it for a long term basis. So for some STUs, I did find that there was for them it was something, there was a need which got fulfilled by something like this. Because they were already trying to do, there were demands from their transport minister and finance ministers for these details, but those were not available, and so they were pretty happy with it. They can be, of course, there are some STUs. For example, J&K was the case that such low staff. I mean, staff to bus ratio in J&K, I think, was 2.4 or something. Even the officers themselves, they were preoccupied with a lot of other work. They had, I mean, there was nobody dedicated to planning as such. So, I mean, this is a challenge, and I would say it would be a challenge for about 2/3 of the STUs in India. and that culture change will take time. We'll have to bring it in, and that is why till the time that happens, till the time these STUs start using it on their own, perhaps a lot of advocacy groups, a lot of CSOs like yourself, I mean, if you are partnering with these STUs, that assistance can be provided by your team. I mean, at least for the initial years. So that's how I see. I hope I've answered your question. I don't know.
So my other question is, like, if the STUs are interested to go ahead and test this tool, is the toolkit which you are given is sufficient enough for them to go ahead, or you also provide them some support in form of capacity building?
So BMTC, I mean, I just had last year we had a on call with them with BMTC. Oh, sorry, last week. Last year. So last week we had this discussion with them, and BMTC is very keen because they are, I mean, from the time we took the data from them, that was in November, till now, they already have a couple of more scenarios that they are keen in. They want to start running small mini and midi buses for as metro feeder services and things like that. So they have some additional services that they want to start running. So BMTC is very keen to use this tool. The MD has asked her team to start looking at it and start creating those additional scenarios. Of course, they have asked us to handhold them, which we have, of course, we have agreed. But there is hesitation. Yes, they do think that, I mean, if we start with it, whether we'll be able to input all that data, whether we'll understand all those things. There is that hesitation, but there is also an interest to start working on it. So, I mean, I can talk about BMTC. That's the only one that we have had a discussion with the tool as an STU. So we're looking forward to discuss with, to show it to more STUs. Yes. Any other questions?
Hi, Sandeep, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Shilpa here. Hi, everyone. So, Sandeep, I had a suggestion. Like, do you think investing in like improving the interface of the tool will get transit agencies more interested? Right now, it's a little bit complex, and if we could make it a little bit simpler.
Well, that needs to be tested. I mean, so okay, that may be one pathway, but we are not too sure because I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of STUs starting to use it. Yes, maybe in another 6 months' time, we may have one of. I mean, that is one of the directions to start working on. But we have tried to make it as simple as possible. And we did discuss the interface with the STU officials also when we were developing it. So the language and the arrangement of the text and things like that was on the basis of what they understand. And I'll be very frank, the only detailed exercise that we could do was with this kind of an interactive exercise we could do was with BMTC. And they were forthcoming on this, and we had a very detailed interactive exercise with their officers when we were collecting data and when we were putting together the tool. So we did get inputs on that. So the terminology that is used, how it should be presented, and in the on the forms and things like that, we got some hints. It may not be. I mean, there may still be a lot of scope for improving the interface. Yes. But we'll only come to know when people really actually start giving, STU officers start giving you frank opinion on it.
Of course, I think just following up on Shilpa's question there, I think if there are, if you have any sense that there are improvements that can be made on this front or on any other aspects of the tool, do just send us an email on either that's the same thread where you got the invite, or even you could address it to Sandeep or even me. and we'll try and get those addressed. Because to an extent, that's the intent of this exercise as well, to familiarize yourselves, familiarize those who are, let's say, technically equipped to understand this tool. Because STUs, while they may be the final and ideal client in this case to use this tool, they may not be the first ones to use it, for sure not. There's definitely a threshold there that needs to be passed. So I think if you can give us your comments, that would be very, very valuable.
And for others also, I think everybody else, if you think there's something that needs to be, can be added, maybe in the outputs, maybe there should be more data or less data that should be asked for, or the interface should be made in a particular manner. I mean, happy to accept all those suggestions.
Sandeep, I might have a question.
Yes.
Ashish.
Yes, Ashish.
So I don't know. I mean, it's very interesting what you've shared, and it's good to look at the tool. But have you had the experience of running it through one of the city bus corporations, and what has been the feedback? And do you think this tool might be relevant for them with some considerations?
So as I said, we did run it through BMTC. Of course, we could not have a physical meeting because of all of this lockdown and things like that. So at about three different stages, we ran it through BMTC. The final tool was discussed with them a week or more than a week ago. So the feedback so far is that as far as usability and understanding of the inputs and things like that go, I mean, they are pretty much okay about it. It's that, see, the problem is that you need you need a set of inputs, but once you open the tool, then these inputs present to you. They come one after the other, and at that point of time, you may not have what you call all that data available. So one of the suggestions that was given by the STUs, and then of course we basically incorporated that, was that we already have some set of forms which tells the STU that this is the kind of data that is required, and this is how you put in the data when the tool presents itself. And so that that exercise could be done separately without using or opening the tool. You just put together the data instead of then at that last moment trying to open different files and trying to find the data. You collect that data in one place, and then when you run the tool, it will just take you less than an hour to start getting the outputs. Two levels of difficulty still remain. The existing data is still easy for these STUs. They do not have any problems in putting it together, even understanding, even filling it. That's what my understanding from BMTC, I think. But the vision data may still be a problem. So, I mean, even when we were trying to figure out, envision the future scenario with BMTC, we could understand the hesitation in saying that, okay, no, our mode share tomorrow, we should target 28% or 30% or 33%. There is no basis for something like that. When we showed them the CMP, then they said, yeah, the CMP looks nice, we can do 28%. Similarly, for other operational characteristics, they are hesitant. I mean, I'm sure most of the SUs will be hesitant in finalizing their vision inputs and the vision data. The current data, I think they are pretty comfortable with.
Sure. So a related question, I'm sorry that I asked more. Relating to what you just said, do you expect the STUs or the transport corporations to themselves do the visioning and use this tool, or you expect advocacy and research groups who work with them to use it and tell them what options they might work with?
This is exactly the role for advocacy and research groups. I mean, I do not see, because these organizations are not trained as any planning organizations, they are wary of taking up any planning decisions and things like that. So this is a clear role for advocacy and research groups and all partners who may be sitting here right now. So I mean, I don't see STUs on their own being able to envision it. I see them doing a business as usual scenario in most of the cases.
Sure. Thanks.
We have hit time, so we are at 4:02, and we've, I think, passed the time by 2 minutes. So I think, respectful of everybody's time, what we could do is, in case there are any lingering questions, anything that you would like to probe us in private, do send us an email. You may call us and figure out more on how you can use this, how you could go about giving us also maybe a feedback from your side on how the experience has been. Yeah, and then we'd like to definitely collaborate as many ways as possible with your organization to also maybe provide you some kind of let's say support in case you would like to run this tool with any of your partner organizations, STUs, or agencies. So yeah, let us know how we may use this opportunity, and yeah, I think we could probably end the call with that. And I would like to thank Sandeep again for taking this time off and providing this webinar. Any last words, Sandeep?
I would like to thank everybody who took out the time to attend this webinar. I just certainly hope that people find it useful, and we get a lot of feedback. So I mean, I'm really looking forward to more feedback because I mean, it's just been launched. Very few people have actually used it. The more people use it, the better feedback. I mean, more we learn about it, and more are the chances that we'll improve it further. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's end.